Hello, and thank you for tuning in to Fed Up, your no BS nutrition podcast. I'm your host, Kayla Marie, certified personal trainer and nutrition specialist, working with clients since 2014. After swimming up diet culture's bullshit stream for so many years, I am fed the absolute up with how miserable it's making people feel when we are supposed to be getting healthier. This podcast is here to help you gain your sanity back so you can stop yo-yoing once and for all and finally learn how to trust yourself so you can enjoy food again without fear or shame while still getting to your health goals. My aim is to teach you how to detect the BS in not just the food and diet industries, but in all realms of life, because I know that, like me, we are all just a little fed up. So without further ado, let's dive into today's episode. Hello, friends. Welcome on back to the Fed Up podcast. Thanks so much for being here. My AI filter does a pretty good job of removing background noises, but if you hear some cows screaming in the background, we are recording inside my little cabin, as we always do, and I live on a cow farm, so sometimes they're much more vocal than other days, but we've got to get a recording out, so bear with me if you do hear that. It's kind of cute, but if you want to see the cows, definitely go onto my Instagram stories. That's typically where I put them, so definitely go check them out. They're pretty cute. There's lots of babies right now because it's springtime. And today it's snowing. That's probably why they're screaming. So anyway, today we are talking about cravings. And ultimately, I'm going to walk you through what really is a craving and where it stems from, and also give you some practical tips for, of course, how to reduce those cravings, how to recognize them for what they are, and manage that. So let's get into it, shall we? First things first, I like to define things. Just a quick little cute story. Growing up, whenever my dad would use big fancy words, of course, I would ask, what does that mean? And he would go, word of the day. And then he would make me go and look it up in the dictionary, oftentimes because the internet was a lot less common when I was growing up in the 90s. And so sometimes, of course, we were able to use the internet, but mostly I was flipping through pages like, okay, what's the next letter? And he would have me spell it out. And it was fun adventure now looking back on it, but it drew me to so much frustration sometimes because I was like, I'm just trying to figure out, I don't even remember what we were talking about now, right? Because we're so hyper-focused on this word of the day. But I digress. I like to define things because that can also give us a little bit of discussion material for really understanding what it is we're labeling. And there are certain times that I split a little bit of hairs. I know that we just use terms colloquially in conversation that don't need to be defined one way or the other, but again, it gives us a starting point, and you'll see what I mean by this. So, definition of craving. A craving versus a wanting. What's the difference, right? A craving is a strong and persistent desire or longing, often for a specific food, substance, or experience. It can be an intense and almost uncontrollable urge to have to do something versus wanting something, right? What's the difference? Why do we always say that I'm craving sugar? Like, are you really craving sugar, or do you just want something sweet? Wanting is, of course, also something that describes desire, but it definitely just has a general, less intense, more mild urge. The craving describes a much stronger, much more intense, much more often uncontrollable desire. And typically, a craving is going to be a strong physical urge, but everywhere that I was reading too, it is often tied to habits, memories. Like, there is a physiological basis for cravings. We often talk about the dopamine response, right? So it's a pretty complex system, but let's just kind of focus on that dopamine response, right? So dopamine is really responsible for our anticipation and reward system so that we do something again. So in terms of animals, this could be if you're talking about a predator versus a prey. a predator is going to get a dopamine rush probably from like chasing prey, because also you catch the prey, you get fed, right? There's this whole reward system that happens, but also in other animals, there's things that it drives them to do. So one example I like to use is these researchers were studying this ground bird. So it makes nests in the ground. And I believe I've talked about this before on previous episodes or a previous episode. And if you're my client, you may have heard this analogy, but it's just so fun because it describes exactly why we crave sugar specifically, or like fatty foods like pizza and ice cream and things like that. So when you have researchers who decide to mess with an animal, it is kind of this funny little game that they play that sometimes what's it called? It results in other outcomes that they weren't expecting. So that's kind of what this story is. I don't remember exactly what they were studying, but ultimately they were looking at the dopamine response of this bird. And they noticed that this bird, when the egg rolled out of its nest, the bird is driven to go and retrieve the egg and bring it back to its nest. Obviously, evolutionary-wise, biologically, this bird is driven to protect its eggs, right? Assuming it doesn't have a prefrontal cortex like humans do, that's a pretty safe assumption. This bird is just naturally driven to do this by instinct, by what's in her DNA, right? To protect the egg. But what the researchers realized eventually is it didn't have to be an egg. It could be any round-shaped egg-like thing outside of the nest. So they realized they could put a golf ball, right? And the bird would go get the golf ball, like, ooh, egg, bring it back into the nest. So they were like, okay, so she doesn't really know how to differentiate between her real eggs, right? And just a round object. Well, what happens when we make the egg bigger? So then they gave it, a bigger ball and a bigger egg, so to speak. And they noticed the bird's dopamine increased alongside the size of the quote-unquote egg item. So much so that this tiny little ground bird was eventually trying to push an entire volleyball into the nest, and the dopamine response was through the roof. These researchers were like, this bird is stoked. It's like, big egg, let's bring it into the nest. It has it doesn't have a thinking brain like humans do, so it's not rationalizing any of this. It is just a driven biological response that happens the bigger the egg got. It was like, ooh, bigger egg, bring it into the nest, right? So using this analogy, let's talk about how come we are so quote unquote addicted to sugary fatty foods, what we call highly palatable foods. And typically those are found in ultra processed foods, right? And why there's such a craving for them a lot of times is not because something's wrong with you, but it's a complex, both environmental and physiological phenomenon that has happened over the course, especially of the last 100 years, where humans have been exposed to bigger eggs. Humans have been exposed to easier and more frequent eggs. We have fast food and chocolate on every frickin' street corner. We have so much access to food in grocery stores that there is nobody policing what kind of food you buy or how you feed your body, right? And maybe there are some people who would like to police that, but we're not going to get into that on this episode. So let's talk about the dopamine response here. The prefrontal cortex, your amygdala, which is your fear center, and your neurotransmitters all do a little dance together when you start thinking about food, anticipating food, and then when you're actually eating and after the food, right? So when you are eating for stress relief, you're going to have more of a dopamine response because you are alleviating that discomfort through super tasty food. Yummy. So when dopamine surges in the brain during cravings, you are reinforcing the association between your craving and the object of that craving. So basically, every time you give in, your brain is like, yes, this is what we should do again and again and again. So now we have a compulsiveness seeking this craving, even when it's not healthy, right? That's why addiction works that way. So when people relate sugar to cocaine, yes, we are still talking about the same dopamine. What do they call it? Dopaminergic. Can never say that word. Anyway, we're talking about the same pathway. Yes. However, sugar is not cocaine. Say it with me now. Sugar is not cocaine. But our brains really enjoy things that make us feel good. All right? Cue literally anything that makes you feel good. All right. So when you look at the hormones involved with appetite and food, like insulin, leptin, ghrelin, things like that, now we're also playing on our physiological, hunger, and not just our brains like, ooh, I just want to engage in a pleasure-seeking behavior to ease my stress. If you're looking at someone who has more adipose tissue, aka fat cells on their body, they are going to be releasing and affecting hormones, which affect your appetite. So, more fat cells are going to interrupt your insulin response, which affects, obviously, we know, your blood sugar and your metabolism of sugar, things like that, diabetes. I'm sorry, sometimes I say it diabetes and I need to not, because as you could just tell, I let that one slip. As you know, insulin is responsible for our response to sugar. And if you have poor insulin response, you have diabetes. All right, I'm done laughing at myself. Ghrelin is your hunger hormone. My physiology teacher used to say it makes your tummy growlin, get it? Haha. So that's your hunger hormone, and leptin is your fullness hormone. So let's simplify it that way. And when you are maybe in a calorie restriction because you're trying to diet, you're trying to lose weight, you're trying to snatch that waist, your fat cells are shrinking, which sends a hormonal signal to your brain that says, we're losing weight, we're losing food, increase appetite. So that's how leptin tells your brain, we are losing weight. It does know that you're 300 pounds, your body's pretty good at regulating that stuff. But once you're overweight, quote unquote, you're obese, whatever it may be, your fat cells are interrupting certain hormones. And now what's happening is, even though you're losing weight and that's healthier for you, leptin's job is to prevent you from losing weight and wasting away and not eating, right? That's going to kill you. So leptin's responsible for telling you to eat more. And every time you diet and try to lose weight, leptin is like, hold your horses. We're starving. Let's increase that appetite. Okay. It's not that it's holding on to all the food you eat more. That's not quite what happens, but your body does become more efficient. So you'll burn less calories overall. Your BMR will decrease every time you diet. We talked about this in the previous episode. So there is a whole cascading effect that's working against you every time you try to lose weight. And when you're looking at cravings, it works the same way. When you're trying to decrease your amount of cravings, your habits, your environmental cues, your triggers, and your hormones are all working against you. So let's talk a little bit more about how to prevent that. First things first, types of cravings. You have physical cravings, your hunger, substance withdrawal, maybe, your need for sleep. Okay. Those are physical cues or physical cravings that are going to keep you alive. Those are necessary. And when I say withdrawal, it's not because cocaine is necessary, but when you're withdrawing, it has a whole, again, other physiological response. But there's physical types of cravings. And then there's emotional types of cravings, which is essentially comfort during your stress or your sadness to relieve boredom. Then you have your physiological cravings, which maybe is the more dopamine response we're talking about. It's your habits. It's your wanting a little treat for a reward type of behavior. So when we kind of look at those, okay, there's a difference between you're hungry and you're craving a little treat, right? So why do we crave these different things? One, if you're hungry, you're going to crave things. And the first thing you're going to crave is energy, because you're hungry and tired and your body needs energy. Every single cell in your body needs energy, and you get that energy from glucose. Your brain likes glucose. It can only function off glucose. When you don't give it glucose, it functions off ketones. That's the only reason we make ketones, is so that your brain doesn't die when you don't have a potato. So when you have this physical hunger and your body is going to respond in a way that maybe makes you crave some food and crave glucose first, or crave highly calorically dense food as well, because you want energy. You're like, give me energy, I'm starving. Eat a cheeseburger and a milkshake, okay? The second reason why we're going to be hungry is, again, those physiological reasons. Habits. The more you eat of this stuff, the quote unquote bad stuff, the more you're training your body to do that and your brain to crave it. So that's number one. But also, the more that you restrict yourself and don't let yourself have these things, the more that you are going to crave it as well. So we don't need more willpower. We need to realize the reason we have cravings: chronic stress, chronic fatigue, dieting, your habits. And maybe I'll add environment in there, because if you look at winter time, you are going to want more food, because just like bears, we're not bears, but just like bears, we want to bulk up for the winter time. We want to have a little fluffin' on our muffin, because if there's a famine, if there's not enough food, we can survive longer with more fat on our body. And it's going to be cold, so we want more fat on our body to stay warmer. Skinny people die in wintertime, okay? So we also might be PMSing. When you are PMSing, or entering your luteal phase, so post-ovulation, your body has released an egg, you're waiting to be fertilized, and then you're not fertilized, and you have your period. Well, during that period of time, no pun intended, but during that time when your body's waiting to be fertilized, sorry to word it that way, that's what's happening, your brain is telling you to eat more food because you might get pregnant. So if you're PMSing, if it's wintertime, if you're losing weight, it's going to, again, affect your hormones that say to eat more, because skinny people die in famine and wintertime. So add all those things together, and then you add in your environment, your sights, your smells, your triggers of driving past the fast food joint, and your habit of you've stopped there every single frickin' night for the past years. I don't know. If you are in your office and someone brings in cupcakes, again, environment, you're smelling it, you're triggered to eat the cupcakes. Well, okay, real life, a lot of my clients are like, well, if people just didn't do that, if I'm just not around it, I won't eat it. Okay, that's not the issue here. The issue is when you're around it, you have no idea how to act. That's what we're going to work on, is you can fix that. We can act a different way. Okay, so the willpower is finite. And you wake up bright-eyed and bushy-tailed with a lot of willpower. That's why earlier in the day, you're great. Breakfast is beautiful. Lunch, it's not so bad. And then dinner time comes and you're hungry and you're tired and you've made a lot of decisions today. Or it's after dinner and you are just winding down. You want a little treat, right? Willpower runs out at the end of the day. Just FYI, again, physiologically, biologically, in your freaking brain, your willpower runs out at the end of the day. And it will run out more and run out harder, so to speak. It'll drop off harder if you practice more willpower earlier in the day. Meaning, if all day long you're restricting, you're like, I'm so good. Look at this perfect little salad I'm eating. You don't allow yourself to slip up ever. Maybe during the day or during the whole week. And then at the end of the week or at the end of the day, you have no more willpower. So then you are craving and you're binging, because a main physiological trigger for craving and binging is deprivation, is restriction. Okay? So the more you try to cut it out, the more you crave it. Period. Hands freaking down. It is not because, well, I'm just addicted to sugar. Well, no. You just haven't trained yourself to act around it. So you just white knuckle your way through it. You have not learned how to incorporate it into a healthy diet. end up mentally berating yourself the entire time before, during, and after said treat, all of those things is going to work against you and increase your cravings over time. I often compare it to the big red button that says, "Don't push me." The more you stare at it and read, "Don't push it," the more you want to push it. And I don't know why, it's just something in our brain. Maybe it's the little rebelliousness of our hearts. We have free will. Don't tell me what to do, right? But when you eat these really tasty foods that over time manufacturers have manufactured into volleyball-sized eggs, our dopamine responses to these foods are huge. This is not because you're addicted to food. This is not because anybody's poisoning us. This is because humans, as an animal, has figured out how to make our most tasty food even tastier. And it's a beautiful thing, but it's also a blessing and a curse all in one, right? Now picture another animal like, I don't know, like dogs. If dogs ruled the world, okay, what would all the fast food chains look like? Dog food and things that dogs like to eat, right? So it's not because we are being poisoned and brainwashed and all of this stuff's added to our food. It's because they added stuff to our food that was like, "Oh, wow, this tastes good." And then everybody bought it. Everybody went crazy for it. And they were like, "Oh, yeah, okay. Profit, yes, but also this shit tastes good. We don't have to eat plain bran meal anymore, Like food did not taste that good before." So we are, one, more sedentary than ever and more mentally, rattled with nutrition, that we add in all these environmental factors and internal factors, and then you also add in the fact that our food tastes better than it ever frickin' has before. It's not your fault. So, when you look at how to cut cravings, Whole30 will tell you that the point of Whole30, when you only eat whole foods and Whole30 approved things, blah, 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 don't do Whole30, do not recommend. Maybe I'll do a whole episode on that. But Whole30 claims that cutting out of that processed food and the sugar food, you stop craving. And the more that you eat whole foods and real foods, then your body, detoxes and blah, 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 and it stops cravings. Now, there is probably a little Auntie Linda somewhere who has only eaten vegetables and proteins and literally doesn't drink anything besides water and black coffee. And she's happy as a little clam and she doesn't have any cravings, right? Okay, I'm not talking about her, all right? Most of us are not her, and she probably has disordered eating anyway. But most of us want a little bit of something, right? So when you cut it out completely and it's only quote unquote 30 days, and then technically Whole30 is supposed to be like an elimination diet. So you're supposed to start adding things back in slowly after the 30 days. But nobody really does that because I've met barely any people that can last the whole 30 days. And then again, it just creates this whole dichotomous yes or no thinking about all these foods. And guess what? Your cravings are back and they're worse than ever. They're worse than frickin' ever. Because whoever, I think her name is Melissa, who created Whole30 does not understand the physiological, physical, and emotional complex system that happens with cravings that has happened and formed over your lifetime, that cutting it out does not work. It has the opposite effect. Instead, here are 3 ways we are going to actually reduce your cravings, regardless of if it's sugar cravings and fast food cravings and all that stuff. And first things first, I want to go back to that definition and remember, you can want something. It's not a craving. Okay, get over yourself. First of all, here's some tough love, okay? You're craving ice cream. Are you? Are you fucking craving ice cream? No, you're not. Get over yourself or have a scoop of ice cream and move the hell on. That's the key of getting over cravings is first things first is stop letting it have so much goddamn power over you. It's just a food. It's just ice cream. You're not craving it the way a heroin addict craves heroin, okay? You have not had anal sex and sold your body to a stranger when you're craving ice cream, okay? So anyway, that escalated quickly. Sorry. And here are 3 ways after that we are going to actually help you reduce those cravings. Number 1, shocker here, we are going to fill up. We are going to eat more earlier in the day. We are going to eat more full meals with protein and carbs and fat and some fiber, because then we're actually full and we don't hit, an hour later and you're like, why am I craving a bag of chips? Well, Karen, it's because you had carrots for lunch. Carrots are not a lunch. Or it's because you had no breakfast and now it's lunchtime and all you can smell are French fries. That's why you're craving French fries. So let's eat more. Let's make sure you're actually eating enough calories and eating enough carbohydrates and supporting your workout or activity with your nutrition, all of those good things. And then when you eat more full meals, this is why I focus on addition, not restriction, is because when you add in fiber like beans and vegetables and plants, and when you add in protein, and when you add in some healthy fats, then you're not that hungry and you stop snacking so much and you're able to wait until your next meal. And if you do want a cookie or have a cookie or someone brings in cupcakes and you just had a full lunch, you can just have a cupcake. Yep, just have one, because 1, it's not that big of a deal. 2, it'll prevent you from having 6 cupcakes later on this week. And because you already just ate lunch that had protein, fats, and fiber, I bet you anything mentally and physically, the cupcake is going to be good for you. Meaning, you stop feeling like you can't have the cupcake because you're on a diet, this, that, and the other. I don't know. It's not that you have to justify the cupcake, but when I know that I've had a good balanced week of eating or day of eating, or I eat pretty well most of the time, so when I do have cupcakes, it's not a big deal, right? That's going to help you out. Okay, so first things first, fill your freaking self up. Eat real food. Stop trying to restrict yourself, because again, all your hormones and everything else is going to be working against you. If you are trying to lose weight, yes, we are going to put you in a mild deficit, but that deficit is going to include a cupcake if that's what you want every week, because it's going to prevent you from falling off the plan and binging the entire dozen. Moving on, number 2, mental restriction leads to binging. So nothing is off limits. I want you to realize your mama not allowing you to have sugar is now affecting you as an adult who is constantly craving sugar. So you need to realize this is a whole lifetime of learning and unlearning. It's a whole thing. All right. So we need to attack the mindset. Because even if you are having sugar, right, your mental restriction of it is what's forcing you and what's leading more to that binging. So it's kind of funny because I'll have people think that, well, I just need to be better about not, eating like a pig after dinner and just eating the entire pint of ice cream. But I'll actually assign them homework to have 1 scoop of ice cream before dinner every day. It's fascinating what that does. Number 3, I want you to be intentional about the nutrition density and your treats together. Zoom out a little bit. Look, I talked about this a little bit earlier. All 3 of these things are really just one thing. But in essence, when you are looking at your whole diet throughout the day, throughout the week, throughout your life, when you're adding in the fiber and nutrients and protein, right? And it's not all or nothing. But you can be intentional about having dessert, about having cookies, about having some chips with your sandwich. So when we look at the whole diet, that's what indicates healthy or not. It's not one food, right? But you've put sugar up on this pedestal and then you demonize it and you get mad at it and you have this weird toxic relationship with donuts. And it doesn't have to be that crazy. You can just have the donut. Right? So that's kind of what I want to leave you on today, is hoping that this helped. I'm sorry I got kind of mad at you there. Hope you forgive me. And I think I have to rate this episode as explicit. All right. I will talk at you next week. Have a lovely day. Bye, friends. Thanks so much for being here, friends. If you enjoyed this episode, please screenshot and tag me over on Instagram or leave a 5-star review wherever you are listening from. Your support means the world to me and only helps me get the No BS news out to more people. If you're interested in working with me in nutrition or personal training, check out my programs and courses on my website at KaylaMarieFitness.com and on Instagram at KaylaMarie_fit. See you next week.